Significant enhancements were made to the purchase order module in the landed costs area. Previously to 7.4, you would need to define landed costs only at the inventory item or vendor level, and they could not be changed. And you still have that capability. With the new feature, it's now possible to define, override, or apply landed costs on an individual receipt basis, providing increased accuracy and cost controls. The landed cost can be applied to a receipt line using a per unit percent of cost or a flat amount per unit, or it can be applied to a receipt total and allocated using one of several allocation methods. When the landed cost transaction is auto-generated or manually added to the receiver and is being allocated by receipt total, the allocation method can be changed and the landed cost amount can be modified if using a predefined landed cost and an amount was not predefined during setup. The calculated line unit cost can also be overridden. So let's look at purchase order and the enhancements there, which is generally the landed cost. But first, let's take a peek at the Setup Pio options. Now what you're going to notice under the General Ledger tab is now a field that allows you to post the freight amount to the item. And this is going to give you additional flexibility as far as recognizing freight. Now on to landed cost, and let's look at the setup. I'm going to bring in the first item. And you'll notice on the main tab there are two additional fields, allocated to and allocation method. The applied to item and applied to purchase order vendor still apply. They can be entered or not, but let's look at the allocated to. You now have the option of allocating the landed cost either at the receipt line or at the receipt total. If you select the receipt line, the allocation methods available are amount per unit and percent of cost per unit. If you decide to allocate the landed cost by the receipt total, which will then disable the apply to item, now you can either do it by cost, by quantity, by volume, by weight, or manually. And as mentioned before, you still have the opportunity to attach a landed cost to an item at the receipt line, to a vendor at either the receipt total or the receipt line. Now I've already created a purchase order for a vendor who is set up for landed costs. Now there really is nothing that has changed as far as the purchase order itself. So where our change is going to be exhibited is when you're receiving goods in. And let's go into that. So I've created a batch for the Rialto warehouse to enter the receipt of goods for this vendor. And I've already entered the receipt. Let's bring that up. And you'll notice that on the header tab, you now have a landed cost. So right now I can see my lines, and let's go back to the header and access the landed cost button. Now at this point, I have the option of overriding my landed cost, and I can see here I've elected to override the landed cost on this cable. I also can see the line totals that are going to be displayed. If this was a freight that was being paid to a third-party vendor, this could be configured as part of the setup, or I can identify it at this time and put a comment. So as you can see, you've got a lot of flexibility in entering your landed costs. At this point, once it's been entered, we would match it if you're set up for matching, and then go ahead and post. Now there's also a new BIE view to look at landed cost transactions. And here I can see that entry. So with the landed cost enhancement, there's much more flexibility in reporting the actual landed costs.